Hello, everybody. Welcome to End Times Talk. Good morning. I hope you're all doing well. I am pleased to bring to you today my brother, Gray. I appreciate you very much, Gray, for coming on.
Appreciate you.
Yeah, so why don't we just start off with kind of the basics and maybe tell the audience a little bit about yourself and your background and what you've gone through and where that's taken you today.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I'm just a guy. I was born into a world of unfortunately MK Ultra type programs, right? Monarch related. I came up in these programs. What can I say? A lot has happened. So, we went through that in my early 20s. Things really came crashing, right? There was a moment to where I became self-aware. I became self-aware in these programs amidst the process of going conscious, which is a whole thing we could get into. And at that point, I went against these programs and this evil with absolutely everything I had. I ended up almost killed, falsely imprisoned for a period of a couple years, officially due to a clerical error, that was kind of put into motion from a group called the Royal Orders of Jesters, who were both my attorney and the judge when that happened. And just so much more. So, without getting too much into the specifics of that, which we can delve into, there were some other people that had kind of helped me up out of that program, right? Because, I'm not the first for that, but there is people, in the world, even throughout the program in different places, who just got caught up in things and aren't with all this just disgusting, despicable, perverted, evil nonsense, right? They just got caught up in life among these bloodthirsty, money-hungry power mongers, warmongers, right? So when I became self-aware after surviving, an attempt on my life, which, broke about half my body after being falsely imprisoned for a couple of years, so on and so forth. When I got out, I was aware of some work done by someone named Valerie Wolf. And Valerie Wolf at the 1995 ACHRE, the Advisory Committee for Human Radiation Experimentation, she, along with two of her clients, which were subjects, victims, survivors of MK Ultra type programs, right? She brought forth a lot of cooperating information, okay? Blindly cooperating information, meaning she was a trauma therapist, and she, along with nationwide trauma therapists, had been running into people that had been talking about the same things, even though they didn't know each other, all across the nation, right? And this goes beyond our nation, but just sticking to this and, my story here. So what happened was she brought forth a lot of cooperating information, and some of the people that helped me out of the program, and then me as well, we put our heads together, and it seemed to make sense to kind of piggyback on the work that Valerie Wolf and her associates had been doing, and then expound on it and extrapolate on it. So we created an organization, an initiative, whatever you want to call it, called Organized Safety, okay? And this essentially was about, hey, how can we address this MK Ultra related programs? How can we address this Manchurian candidates? How can we address all of this as effectively as possible? Because there had been a lot of problems, from way back in the 80s and 90s with the satanic panic, so-called satanic panic, from just all the attacks.
Preschool stuff.
Oh yeah, from the finders, from all this. Yep. Some of this stuff had surfaced, but it was clamped down on, whether it was stopped for reasons of national security in some sectors, Whether there was a war waged against the therapists helping some of these subjects, helping some of these victims, these survivors, these overcomers, whatever, whatever terminology you'd like to use for, wherever you are. But we started organized safety, which essentially was, hey, there's a lot of people out here that don't know each other saying the same thing, in order to be taken credibly. How can we kind of like build this up and present it? So, it was a long path, because at first it was, hey, we got in touch with all the trauma therapists in the US. For example, like you go to Psychology Today, or, some of these major like psychology websites, and you can just pull up, like, for example, all the trauma therapists in the United States, right? So we were sending out mass emails to all the trauma therapists, to selective others. Obviously, there was already some insiders, some defectors, and on top of like survivors and victims that, have their own forums and support groups back then. We kind of tried to, talk to everybody and reach out and say, hey, we need to find a way to put this together and to cross-reference information to better learn and better pursue it. So, that was really, that was a learning process, because it's complicated, unfortunately. When you get into the world of MK Ultra, when you get into the world of Monarch, or when you get into the world of behavioral modification, period, you have people that, they're, as many of you may know, they're under mind control. It's behavioral modification, mind control, trauma-based mind control. Again, whatever terminology you want to use here. You have people that have essentially split personalities. You have people that have, sleeper personas. You have problems, and sometimes if these people aren't healed, they even report. So it's like, you have people in your group, and you may be doing your best to work with others, but then some of these people still have active underlying mechanisms of mind control, sub-personality, subconscious, subsurface personas, or just conditioned stimuli response sequences. Again, you can get caught up in semantics, but the point is that it became clear that just collecting information from the survivors, from the victims, from the subjects themselves, that wasn't as safe. It was putting people at risk unnecessarily, and there's a better way to do it. So over time, this evolved. Along that evolution process, came like a kind of like a geo database, which was where, still we were collecting all this information. Survivors were submitting information, survivors, victims, subjects, etc. They're submitting information, and, say they name a location, say they name a perpetrator involved, so on and so forth. So, that would essentially get logged on a map, and then, would build up from there. But so, like I said, it became apparent that there was a problem. There was problem with the system, because just taking the survivor information alone was creating a unnecessary vulnerability, if you will. So what we did from there was eventually it grew into, okay, what we will do is have a form, okay, that, like, for example, now it's encrypted, the transmission is encrypted, and you can anonymously submit. Hey, we'll have this form, you can submit a person of interest. So if you have information on a person, we can create a location of interest if you have information on a location that's used, or just a general report. A general report meaning like, hey, was there an event? Did something happen? Anything, information other than just if it's a specific person or a specific location, right? Say, hey, this person is part of this, and they're, doing this and that, whether it's drug, weapon, human trafficking, whether it's a programmer for the system, whatever they're involved with, right? But they have locations, say, hey, at this school, this is taking place. Hey, at this underground military base, hey, whatever it is, right? General report, hey, this event happened here. Here's some general information, so on and so forth. So we created it that, hey, people can just submit this information through these forms, and there's three main, person of interest, location of interest, general report of interest. The fourth one there, just so y'all see on this pulled up, is help organize safety. That's just for people to submit if, they feel they have a talent or feel they have something to contribute to help and they want to get involved. But anyways, just going to this. So in order to best keep everyone safe, it developed into, hey, we will have anonymous submissions for, person, location, or just general report. And what will happen there is we will give everybody a report reference code, which is just a random generated code to reference their specific report and say, hey, you make this report and you'll get a report reference code. Now, if you would like to opt in for notification, if your report is corroborated, then you can do so. But in order to keep everyone safe, the best way to do this was for people submitting information to start a brand new email address. And the reason we use a brand new email address instead of your existing email address is because obviously if you use your existing email address, it's still going to lead back to you. Whether your email address has your name on it or not, it cross-references with everything else you've ever used that email address for, right? So that still will lead back to you. So what we say is, hey, if you want to give information, person of interest, location of interest, general report of interest, so on and so forth, just start a brand new email address. And then if you want to, you can opt in for one notification of corroboration, meaning that if the person you name or the location you name, or if there's general information, if whatever it is that you're naming, if it's corroborated by future reports, or if it's already been corroborated by past reports we've received, we recognize that in our system. So then if you opt in, what we will do is we will then email the email address that you had left there, a brand new one, obviously, so it's completely isolated and safe, and say, hey, the information you have submitted, it has been corroborated. Would you like to, in a private chat, meet the people that it has corroborated with, right? And this may be one person is corroborated with. It may be two, it may be five, it may be 10, right? You understand what's going on here. Obviously,
Can I say one thing? No report is too small. No report is too small. You do not have to be a victim of a pedophile politician to be able to report here. Even at the public level, people need to feel free that they can talk about what's happened to them and even possibly link up with other people that have gone through what they've been through.
Absolutely. So that's the whole thing. So just to keep people safest, obviously, hey, start a new email address, you give the tips, and if you opt in, you'll be notified if there's corroboration. And then a liaison will basically help people meet kind of like, on the way out, on the way through this, kind of like make sure everybody's above board, which, it's easy and not easy, right? Like obviously someone experienced with this can tell a little bit, but like, there's an issue with infiltrators in the survivor community, period, and just people trying to steer this process. So like it does take a professional that's familiar with this. But anyways, and then also people can opt in just for like general questions, right? So like it's completely optional, but so you submit a tip. You don't have to opt in for anything. You just submit a tip, boom, that's it. And never be seen or heard from again, right? You're just helping us out. But other than that, you can opt in for notification of cooperation or notification of general questions, because sometimes people will submit a tip and it may not already be corroborated in our system, but it may be a tip that's worth us following up on and say, hey, like this is good information. We have a few more questions. May we ask? So obviously, if you have opted in for that, then you say, yes, you can also ask us questions. Again, you're still anonymous to this point. You just have a brand new email address and, whatever, according to your tip, we may have questions. But so just to give a little information going back on this, this allows us to do a lot of things. And it's been a long battle here, okay? Because there's a lot of problems with trying to pursue justice. Just to be clear, when I became self-aware as a subject in this program myself, and was programmed from birth, had literal split personalities, and, you know, essentially was programmed in an MK Ultra related program, Monarch and related, at the Manchurian candidate level, you know, meaning had a complete separate personality, was taking orders, and, you know, had an alter persona, split personality that, you know, was essentially at that point trained to take orders like a robot. I mean, just, you know, just ridiculous and terrifying at the same point. So it came to it in the middle of a lot. I was in the middle of, you know, I don't even know how to describe it, but I mean, just to be completely straightforward and honest, you know, I was working at a black site that was started by not only the CIA, but also the NSC, the National Security Council, by people that were involved with Oliver North. And if you don't know who that is, there was an Iran-Contra scandal way back people may be familiar with, to where they were importing a lot of cocaine into the United States, that essentially ended up starting the crack epidemic. This, you know, went all the way to Bill Clinton and them in Mena, Arkansas, where a lot was going on, which, you know, some people may be familiar with. And this, you know, went in many directions. But Oliver North, they've made movies about this and stuff. You know, they're importing cocaine to the U.S. They're funding, you know, Contras and, you know, soldiers in Nicaragua running around and training them, and then running psyops. And they were essentially running drug, weapon, and human trafficking, which didn't get as much publicity, but in order to fund black operations, right? So I was at a black site, and I was running a black site at this point in my very early 20s, that was set up during the Iran-Contra scandal, okay, by people that were involved with the CIA, people that are involved with the NSC, again, the National Security Council. They had some of these private groups. Back then, they were called operational subgroups. They can be called task forces. They can be called a lot of different things. But essentially, there is groups that are made with cherry-picked personnel, strategic personnel that are in the FBI, the CIA, the DIA, Defense Intelligence Agency, the NSA, the NRO, the National Reconnaissance Organization, and a lot of these groups, and they would cherry pick personnel so they could combine the access and the powers from a lot of these different organizations, right? So they have people from all these different organizations pulled into these operational subgroups, pulled into these task forces, again, whatever you want to call them. And essentially that way they could have their people everywhere. This went beyond task forces to where they would have people, for example, in the US, in legislative, judicial, and executive, right? So they could combine the powers that are meant to be separate in order to kind of do whatever they wanted for their own personal agenda within their group, right? So, you know, I was at this airstrip, Hunter Field 06TN, right? And that's on the outskirts of Greater Nashville area, right at the border of Columbia and Spring Hill, Tennessee. And there was a lot going on there. So what happened was, when I became self-aware, among other things, one of the first moves that I did was I called the FBI and I reported. I said, you know, hey, you know, we have drug, weapon, and human trafficking. We have, you know, some traders that are running under the clandestine services, right? They are kind of running some of these gangs and cartels, and they are, you know, infiltrated in law enforcement, so on and so forth. And they're also piggybacking on the infrastructure of these fraternities, and they are exploiting the membership loyalty in these fraternities of Masonic organizations, such as the Royal Order of Jesters and related. And, you know, these people are carrying out crimes. So I reported to the FBI. What happened when I reported to the FBI? Well, there was immediate retaliation, and shortly thereafter, that led to me being falsely imprisoned due to a clerical error. Okay, so, you know, and that's a whole thing of its own. But anyways, that's, you know, that was my personal experience. I got on with that and said, hey, you know, you try to report this to the proper channels. what happens. Unfortunately, that's not exclusive to me by any means. There has been a lot of people that have reported, whether to local municipalities, whether to national, right? Whether it's to your local. In Tennessee here, we have TBI, the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. Then you have your federal, obviously, Federal Bureau of Investigation, so on and so forth. So that was a problem. Again, that just led into creating the system that said, hey, lots of people report. It's a harrowing experience to report. One, these people aren't necessarily trauma informed that take the reports. So like sometimes people that do report, hey, I was human trafficked, hey, I was this or that. One, it might be too outlandish for the people receiving these reports to where like, hey, this is a little bit too crazy for me. Two, the people reporting might be fresh out of trauma. And if you're fresh out of trauma, you might be a little frantic. It might be hard to articulate this. And also, maybe your background isn't with military, isn't with intelligence. Maybe it's your background isn't with law enforcement. And you're just doing your best as a victim of horrible abuse to try to report this. And yes, you're a little frantic and, scattered. That's fair. No one can blame you for that.
The way people get treated, even if they call 911, if you're just a little bit, having a tough time, they really like, you need to calm down. You need to calm down, and they treat you like you're crazy.
No, 100%. And like, you have your good, better people, and you have people that are worse as far as that are like receiving those and all that. And like, kind of like pinning it on them aside. It's just a whole thing. Like not everybody's trauma informed, not everybody's familiar. Like it's hard to deal with that. So anyways, it's a very imperfect reporting process. Then on top of that, there is a problem with policies that are set forth. Like there is some policies that kind of like, create issues with following up on this. If you get too far up on it, yes, there is national security programs that this is tied into that complicate things on a high level depending what's reported on. And there's just a lot of issues with it. There's also strategically placed personnel in bottlenecked areas in law enforcement, in judicial, just all over, to where, yes, they have their own personnel. They, meaning the powers that be, these culprits, right? These pedo cultists, you're fair, I want to call them, right?
I think your earbuds just died.
So
I can still hear you though.
So anyways, we said, okay, at this point, like we recognize the problems with this. So what can we do? Well, again, we created this organized safety, moved on from, hey, maybe we shouldn't take direct survivor names and all this. Like, what can we do best to, one, map out, the network of culprits and perpetrators and so on and so forth. And what can we best do to protect the witnesses, the informants, the survivors, the victims, the subjects, et cetera, et cetera. Well, hey, again, it led to, we created organized safety to where eventually it went to anonymous encrypted reports. No name is involved. You get a report reference code, and basically just you can opt in if you want notification of cooperation. That way, people don't have to needlessly risk themselves, because that's the thing. Like, just take this to, you have Epstein. Everybody's very familiar with the Epstein situation. And yes, there was a lot of reports that didn't go anywhere. Yes, there was handled. Even when they eventually pursued this, there was lawyers that stepped in that had intelligence ties. And what did they do? They handled the operation. They said, okay, we're going to get all your settlements, but you're going to have to sign this NDA. That means that you won't name additional perpetrators. And basically you can't say X, Y, and Z. You get this settlement. Okay, boom. And now you have to be quiet. Unfortunately, there's like NDAs that do that. There's the same thing for example, there was a juvenile facility, the Sununu Institute, and the Sununu, there was governors, there was the son, there was the father that were governors. There's a Sununu Institute that was like a juvenile correctional center where they were running these MK Ultra programs. Same thing. They came in, this blew. What do? Hey, okay, sign this. You can't talk about anything additional to this. We'll give you a settlement, but you have to sign an NDA. Same sort of thing. Like they're cleaning it up. Okay. just real quick to name a few where similar situations have happened and like reporting has kind of led to dead ends or been like clamped down and been basically has basically been suppressed. Well, infamously, unfortunately, we all know about the Catholic Church. That's been a huge thing. Okay. Similar has also happened with the Jehovah's Witnesses. Similar has also happened with the Mormons, the Church of Latter-day Saints. Similar has also happened in Scientology. Okay, guess what else? The Boy Scouts of America. There was like a $2.3 billion lawsuit with 80,000 victims, okay, which is such an incredibly large amount, 80,000. And also keeping in mind is you have the Boy Scouts and the Eagle Scouts. That ties in with the state. A lot of people don't realize that. Those organizations tie in with the state. Due to that lawsuit, they actually like redid their structure. I'm not exactly sure of how that ended up, but they have already redone their structure because of that, gigantic lawsuit. So anyways, again, you have Epstein, you have Nygaard, right? Which was I think that was more in Canada.
Peter Nygaard.
Peter Nygaard, exactly. You have Sandusky, who was like, I think that was the Penn State wrestling. You had a lot of people report on him, and it was getting covered up. You have Larry Nassar, who was like the coach for the Olympic gymnasts and stuff like this. I'm just giving a few publicly known examples to where there was multiple people reporting, and it was covered up. So, there's a lot of instances in this to where before this finally hit the public, when there was enough people that they couldn't suppress it anymore, to where some of these people that reported, they were retaliated on. They were slandered. They were subject to more abuse for standing up and trying to do something. And it's just ugly and disgusting. And again, even if they weren't, some of these people that just report to their local municipalities, that report to their local police precinct or something like that, it's a harrowing experience. They have people that are rude to them, frustrated with them, people that aren't trauma informed, that don't know how to handle these reports and just don't know how to deal with it, period. So anyways, we started this. We said, okay, so, hey, what's the solution for this? Obviously, we went through several iterations and we constantly evolved this and learned and got better. But it was like, okay, hey, we can just make a simple form, even better that it's, encrypted. So the transmission is encrypted just for a little bit more protection, and that it's anonymous. But say, hey, okay, so make this tip. It's anonymous. And if you really want to pursue this, opt in for notification of cooperation. That way, people are reporting. Okay, if it's just you, unfortunately, it can be very hard to actually get anywhere with that unless if you have like some hardcore evidence, which is, pretty rare, unfortunately. So, but what happens is, say, if you have 2, if you have 3, if you have 5, if you have 10 people, well, maybe it meets preponderance of evidence for a civil lawsuit. Maybe it meets burden of proof for a criminal lawsuit. So what we do is, we have all these reports. We're mapping out the system and learning about it best we can. But then meanwhile, if there's something that corroborates, we say, okay, hey, this has corroborated. Okay, when did these crimes take place? Is there specific criminal statutes that have been violated that that have been violated? Is there specific criminal statutes that have been violated? Okay, so like basically say, okay, now we have 5 people that name this sort of abuse coming from this person within this time frame at this location. Okay, so hey, what are the criminal statutes? They broke this, this, and that. Okay, what's the statute of limitations on this? Is this still prosecutable? So it may be prosecutable and it may meet burden of proof for criminal justice, or it unfortunately may be beyond criminal prosecution because of statute of limitations or so on and so forth. And in that case, maybe it can just meet the preponderance of evidence for a civil lawsuit. But the point being is that people can submit this information, link up behind the scenes, and gather themselves and then prepare to move forward effectively and make the decision to move forward effectively only if it's going to be effective. Instead of just saying, hey, I'm reporting, I'm sticking my neck out there and, just leaving it open to shop. Because, there is plenty of perpetrators that are looking to knock down victims, even if they're not their own personal victims, like they're trying to send a message to victims out there, period. This is unfortunately a game being played, and it's not a game, but it's just that, lack of a better term, like this is the constant struggle going on. So again, we just designed the system to be as simple as possible to address this. And now, after I had learned, unfortunately, this said, hey, there was a problem. I reported to the FBI. I was retaliated on. I was almost killed, then falsely imprisoned due to a clerical error. I got out. What did I do at that point? Okay, me and people that I'm working with, we started strategically notifying people. We said, okay, so the proper channels are compromised. We've got that. Through bottlenecks, there's some policies that seem to be kind of fishy the way that they're implemented, and they're not the most supportive policies to be effective for pursuing justice, right? They don't seem the best. But other than that, too, at certain bottleneck locations in reporting in the process, there seems to be strategic personnel, in place. So what did we do? We said, well, hey, if we can't get anywhere with this, maybe we should strategically notify personnel that says, hey, we're having a problem with these proper channels, but boom, here's a package of 5 people saying the same thing that don't know each other, and here's some supporting evidence and some other verifiable information, boom. So like we started strategically notifying people, right? Another thing, like say, for example, personally, I had a relationship with the senator of Tennessee and his family, among other people. But so, and one of the senator's daughters was running a early childhood development center. Now, you might think back to Presidio. You might think back to the Finders. It's the same thing that was going on. What were they doing? Unfortunately, at this early childhood development center that was affiliated with this private school, they were conditioning children. Okay, they were smothering babies when they cried. They were doing things and, color, shapes, et cetera, et cetera. They're doing early MK Ultra type training. But, is basically what it boils down to. Okay. There was problems reporting it. We couldn't get anything done. Well, what did we do? We secured the emails of all the parents that had children in this early childhood development center. We posed as another parent and anonymously emailed everybody that, we could obtain the emails from, which was almost everybody that had a child going to this early childhood development center. And we said, hey, there has been some events. We're worried about our child here. We believe there has unfortunately been some abuse that's taken place. Has anybody else experienced any other events or have any concerns? And what happened from that was there was other people that had, and that led to that woman being fired from that job and things being moved around. Long story short. So, that was like one very simple kind of creative way to address this, right? That went. So anyways, that was early on. That was back in 2014. Since then, again, we continuously developed our process and found different ways to address this and have been building the system. But anyway, so just basically, it's got to the point now where we found, again, the very clean way to do this, just encrypted anonymous submissions, opting in for notification of cooperation, or opting in if you would be willing to answer other questions about your tip. And then what we found we can do is, say we have another tip, say I'm just coming up with something completely random. Say we have in New Hampshire, we have another early childhood development center, right? Say, we have an early childhood development center at a private school, and we've got a report there. Say we even have 2 reports there, whatever. Well, guess what? The same thing. Not necessarily instead of just getting the emails and saying, hey, has anybody else experienced abuse or whatever? You go to that very school and, post a bulletin that says, hey, if anybody has any concerns with what's going on, please submit this anonymously. Say people are going to a local congregation. Say people, say we get tips from a wrestling program, right? Like Sandusky, right? Say we get a tip from the gymnasts like Nassar. Just again, no matter where it is, the point is that if we get a tip and there's information enough that makes it clear that it is serious and ongoing, right? Well, what can we do is we can make a standalone organized safety system, which again is just essentially a form, which is very simple. It's just a form where people can, anonymously submit information through an encrypted transmission. And what can happen is we can reach out to that local area, okay? Say, hey, would you guys like to basically run this form? Obviously, we vet the people running it and stuff like that, but the people that submit these tips, so on and so forth, we say, hey, we're going to run this in your local area. Because obviously, me and my associates, we can only do so much, and you get to so many tips. It's, it's, you only can do so much in a day, right? So the point is that we make a standalone system and we say, hey, address it in the neighborhood. Again, whether it's the local wrestling coach, whether it's, the local gymnast, whether it's the local church, the local daycare, whatever, you have people there that are experiencing the concerns. Well, guess what? Boom, post a bulletin, a QR code, whatever you want. You can do outreach. When we know there's smoke somewhere, we can do outreach and find the fire, if that makes sense. So like it's that simple, and anybody can run it. And this brings the power to it's peer-to-peer information, right? So what are the advantages of this? Well, it brings the power to the people. It says, hey, if say, New Hampshire Early Childhood Development Center, say people report to the police. Okay. Well, unfortunately, and I'm not against reporting to the law enforcement, but the problem is that there's so many compromised areas and so many things where stuff doesn't happen and people get retaliated on, so on and so forth. So the whole point here is that, if we run this system, it puts all the power, all the control in the people. You report to the police, you report wherever. Well, there can be disputes about the veracity of the information, right? The efficacy, the reality of the information. There can be disputes even if there was a report. There can be plenty of disputes. Just like again with Epstein, they say, oh, we haven't got this report. Oh, we haven't got this information. And you see a lot of different stories about the information, right? And I know some has been released, but they say, oh, we didn't get this. We did get this, blah, 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 blah. They can't play that game. Whenever the power is in the people's hand and there's a standalone organized safety system, the reports are in, Well, they can't dispute that. We have that to directly oppose that, to directly show and say, hey, well, actually, this has existed and this was reported, and here is a log to where we handed it over. So that's the thing. It's like that's the whole point. Is basically creating a third party, creating a watchdog group, creating a local standalone system that gets the information and then pushes pursuing it. That way they can't deny the veracity, they can't deny the existence, and they can't deny that this information has been handed over. So it puts the power in the people's hands, and then say, hey, now we've got 3, we've got 5, we've got however many people that say, hey, at this local daycare, this local early childhood development center, at this local, wrestling, team, whatever, at this local gymnast team, whatever it is, you understand what I'm saying? Just any of these situations, they can say, hey, there's been corroborating reports. What's going on? Why isn't this pursued? And if then the proper channels don't want to pursue it, again, they can't deny the existence of the evidence. They can't deny the veracity of it because this is held by another system. And you see what I'm saying? So basically, it's just a way to put the power in the people's hands to make sure that this is getting pursued. And then if it's not being pursued, well, they can then have the power to go more public with it. Again, we don't have to name the victims publicly. We don't have to name this. We just have to verify that, hey, we have all this information and we can 100% confirm that it exists. And why isn't this being pursued? And so if we have compromised areas along the way, that can get fully exposed, and they can kind of just use, leverage from public attention to push it further. So it's just a mechanism that puts the power in the people's and the victims and the survivors' hands.
it's a way to stack the odds in the favor of the survivors and against the perpetrators.
Exactly. While
And it literally stacks.
maximizing the safety. Yeah, it's the safest way and basically most effective way to take power, to take control of the information and to make sure that it gets pursued, right? And it also gives the ability to people to basically build up the veracity, to build up the efficacy, to build up a case, right? Before they just risk their neck to go out there and push it, right? They can
And
all
this
collect
is
themselves behind the scenes and then push forward together as a unified front instead of getting separated, being pressured to sign an NDA for anything to happen, for being handled. That's the thing. A lot of these victims, a lot of these survivors get handled in one way or the other, and that's if it even gets to the point where they're pursuing anything. So yeah, it just puts the power back in the hands of the people, and allows us to truly take control of holding people accountable and pursuing justice.
and so you said that right now you have the forums. When you go to organizedsafety.org that I've been showing during this live, that
Mhm.
people can report through these forms a person of interest, a location of interest, an event of interest, or just whatever. But then also you're going to be adding an actual website here soon. Would you be willing to tell everybody about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, very soon, and I've been doing this a while, and I'm going back and forth with someone that helps do this. Like, we are about to launch a full website. There's a few facets of the website. One is going to be merch. Okay, yes, we're going to sell merch for organized safety. One, because that will actually help get the word out, and we're hoping like some of our merch is kind of like geared to kind of hit a demographic that might not typically respond as much to hearing these like human trafficking survivor stories and stuff. Some of these military aged men, for example, they're not going to listen to podcasts with survivors of human trafficking. They're not interested in that. But they see a snake with a dagger through its head, right? And they want to take charge and go for the head of the snake, and do all this. So we can kind of catch on with that. And we're kind of trying to hit demographics that are willing to fight and stand up and fight for survivors, all the while educating them, right?
Right.
Because that's really what a lot of this happens, so we're going to be pushing that. And, the other aspect is that because we need help funding operations. I'm going to be completely honest. In 2014, like I said, after I had been released from false imprisonment, after almost being killed in an assassination attempt, and having half my body broken, so on and so forth. Bad things happened, like I said, when we got that early childhood development center shut down, when we did other things, okay? Because, I, had, long story short, I had whistleblown on black sites that were running since Iran-Contra. And we're talking about black sites that aren't just used for drug, weapon, and human trafficking, but we're talking about mission, practice, and deployment forward operating locations for assassinations on U.S. soil, okay? Like, I mean, we're talking about there's some dirty stuff going on that's being blanketed under national security, that's being tied in with, unfortunately, official programs that may serve some aspects of legit national security and things like this. So it got really, really, really messy. So since 2014, I'd actually been quiet. I was helping survivors in the background. We were running organized safety privately, but organized safety has just went public starting at the end of 2022, really into 2023. That's when I decided to go back public because I couldn't handle it anymore. I knew that we weren't making enough difference in the back end, and the only way to really do what we've been called to do, to serve the purpose we were called to serve and to help people, was to go public. Right. Now, at that point, I was running a successful company, and me and a couple other people were completely funding the operations ourselves. In 2023, after I had discussed with advisors of the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, and just so people know, the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, the SSCI, that's the successor to the Church Committee. And the Church Committee was the committee that basically brought out MK Ultra and all that in the mid to late 70s, if people remember. So, I had spoken with the advisor to the SSCI. I had dealt with a staffer, senior staffer at the Armed Forces committees, and so much more. And And stemming from that, what happened was a series of things. One was that I had men come into my business, a stuttering, scared man from Alaska, a scientist, that came in and told me that I chose cancer. He told me that I chose cancer, and was scared to death, and essentially sent me a message from the people that he was working for that told me I chose cancer because of what I was doing. Okay. Um, that happened very close to the same time as when me and two of my closest associates with organized safety had passed information. We had sent information to journalists, to the advisor of the SSCI, to the staffers at the Armed Forces Committees, and to select other places that I can't say because some places are not corrupt and some places are helping, so I can't name everywhere. But what had happened was, within 24 hours of transmitting information up to the director level of a three-letter agency, to where we had testimony and evidence from the director, and there was corroboration as well of that, talking about, hey, yes, I was raised in an MK Ultra related program. Yes, we have these illegal programs. Yes, these illegal things are taking place involved with, again, it leads back to drug, weapon, and human trafficking. Once we transmitted these packages and these sample packages to these people, me and two of my associates were retaliated on, meaning that within 24 hours, in states apart, all of us were hit with essentially a directed energy weapon. I was out jogging. All of a sudden, when I was jogging, I felt a sharp pain in my brain, fell over, projectile vomited, and was just in bad shape. My brain felt hot, for a lack of a better word. I got back, was resting, ice pack, stuff like that, horrible shape. And I talked to my couple of associates that were involved with. One of my associates, he was in a car with his wife. They were both hit with something. His wife ended up having to go to a facial surgeon. I'd have to respond back to the exact terminology, but essentially she got hit with something too, and it messed with the nerves in her face to where it's almost like a stroke, or to where like you get like the one side like paralysis. So she had to go to like a facial surgeon, or I'm not saying the term right, but long story short, him and his wife got hit. And then I had my other associate hit, who was the liaison to the director level, because we sent 3 packages, and one of the packages was at the director level to a former director of a 3-letter agency. And he was 40, approximately 40, in perfect health, and he developed fast onset, fast acting cancer, and he passed within a month. Okay. I mean, leaving behind, children, leaving behind a wife. I mean, it's just completely horrible stuff. So anyways, we had all been doing what we could and pouring into this, to, fund this. And unfortunately, it's got to the point where I left behind my business. They've had to, make adjustments on their end. And obviously my other friend had passed, and we're just doing the best we can. So, now what are we doing? We're looking to launch merch to kind of help raise awareness and to help fund the operations, because again, this is not easy or cheap, and it's like, we got to do what we can. So we're running that. Along with the launch of the website, we're not only going to sell merch and stuff like that, but we're also going to have a private forum just for like survivors and stuff like that to discuss. A lot of people, are out here on social media, and I'm sure y'all have seen kind of like this topic explode just publicly recently, which is good, but there's also a downside to that. And the downside to that is that they're essentially trying to water down the good information. They essentially just release a lot of bad information alongside the good information and muddy the waters. You start searching for this, and it's very hard for an outsider or a layman to know what's real and what's not real. Go ahead.
No, it's fine. So what I wanted to say is that, like, I wanted to explain the logo that Organized Safety uses for my audience, and it's a logo that's called the Ouroboros, and it is an occult symbol where the snake is eating its own tail, representing the satanic cycle of abuse and just all of the evil that's going on in the world. We know that that Satan, the serpent, is the power of this world for the time being. Jesus is going to take that back one day. But the organized safety logo is the Ouroboros that is getting stabbed in the head and coughing out its tail, breaking that cycle. All
The
right.
Noroboros. We call it Noroboros.
No Roboros. You know what I'm saying? So, I think it's an awesome symbol, and it's showing that snake, the serpent, is losing its grip on the earth. You can see the earth in the center of the logo, and so I wanted to explain that to my audience so they understand what even the symbolism behind organized safety is all about. It's about not only standing up for the abused, standing up for the children, but it's attacking Satan. It's attacking the enemy. It's there is nothing that Satan loves more than child trafficking and human trafficking. There's nothing more. We know from like the Epstein files that he loves it when the abuse of children happens. He loves it when, there's cannibalism that takes place and child sacrifice that's taking place. And, we have to support, as brothers and sisters in Christ, those who are willing to take a step out and make an impact in these departments where very few are brave enough to go. All right. And I do my part by making, documentaries and things like that. And Gray's been a huge part of that. This man has helped me so much behind the scenes. And, I just have to, give an applause to you, man, for all that you've done to help End Times Talk and the ministry that I have here, that God's put in my hands, but also the people that watch the documentaries. You know what I mean? And so I think it's an amazing thing what you're doing, Gray. And I couldn't be more thankful to the Lord for putting a friend like you in my life, man.
Man, thank you, brother. I greatly appreciate that. And yeah, that's exactly what it's about. It's about breaking the cycle. It's about going for the head. Even if you look at this, yes, this is a hydra, there's many heads. Yes. But this is about, smiting the head of the snake. This is about going after this. This is about doing the right thing to stop this evil, and again, this is about keeping witnesses, survivors, victims, subjects as safe as possible and pursuing this as effectively as possible, and about putting the power in the right hands, right? The power of the people. Because here's the deal is, I'm going to be honest, there's I've had to learn this for myself. There's no one coming to save us. There's no one coming to save me, right? I've got to do it myself. We've got to do it ourselves. And there's no one better than the people that have experienced this. And yes, I realize there is some people on the outside that help this, but a lot of people that are really in this fight, usually the majority of them, they've experienced themselves. Other than that, the other majority is the people that are perpetrators, because they get involved with this sort of stuff and they try to infiltrate because, say someone gets in an anti-trafficking position, right? If they're a perpetrator, well, guess what? That's the happiest place for them. They get a fresh supply of victims. They're in a position of authority. They might be able to manipulate the policy, or, they'll be trusted and they can sabotage things, right? So they're very happy to be there. So anyways, yeah, this is about just countering that and going right for that. We've got to go for the head. We've got to break the cycle, and we've got to organize safety. And that's the thing, because this isn't about vengeance. This isn't about attacking. This is about protecting. This is about protecting our young, right, protecting our future, protecting the sanctity.
And Jesus's love for the children is so fierce. He doesn't want to see, any harm come to children, and he puts men that want to do something about it in the way of these perpetrators. Got to stand up against it, man. And I'm not saying I disagree with you, but I believe absolutely, Jesus has our backs through what we're doing. He's protecting us. We're alive today because he has our backs. And I as for me and myself and my channel and the things that I've done, I give him full credit. There's a time I was laying down and taking a nap because I was super tired. And as I was kind of going to sleep, I felt the Holy Spirit really come on me strong. And he was like, I am going to cause you to be invisible in the midst of your enemies. They're not even going to know you're there. You know what I mean? And so I believe with people like me, people like you, when we go out, we do these things, we're alive today and we're vertical because of God,
No, 100%. Yeah, and I'm not speaking against that either.
Yeah, no, I know that.
But I also wholeheartedly believe that we can't stand by, right? We have to do our part, and I'm compelled to do my part. And I've had my own experience, which a lot of the people that I speak to I think I kind of go on the opposite end, a little rougher around the edges and this and that to speak to a certain demographic. And I believe, that I've had my own experience to where I was even saved. And I had an experience that really was a literal come to Jesus moment. That's been a strong guiding point in my life. But anyways, yeah. So point is, yes. We are launching even more. Obviously, the report form has been up since 2023 to where people can report, and we've been pursuing that. And yes, we're strategically notifying certain personnel.
Years, 23 years you've been doing this. That is amazing.
Well, no, not 23. Not 23. Since 2023, this is when
2023.
Public, yes. Organized safety itself was launched really 2014. In 2013, it was starting to come together, but as far as like organized safety really getting launched, reaching out to nationwide trauma therapists, and then like really heavy outreach, that was 2014. So at this point, it's been 12 years. But since 2023 is whenever our form went public, because we were working with nationwide trauma therapists behind the scenes, with defectors, with insiders, with survivors, with victims, with subjects of the MK Ultra related programs, and so on and so forth. But yes, as far as pushing this form actual public, yeah, that happened in 2023. So we've been building on it with that. And yes, now we're going to expand the website to the next part, which obviously is to have merch available to help fund operations and to help people show support. And also, because we're building up the power of this symbol that says, hey, we're taking y'all symbol and we're crushing them, we're smiting them, and we're showing y'all like this is coming back at y'all. Y'all want to play this game? Guess what? I'm saying this will be your downfall. You live by symbology, you die by symbology.
Well, believe it or not, like I'm not even gonna lie, dude. Like I got myself a shirt, and I got it because I wear tank tops in the summer. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I got a shirt too, and the front has a glow in the dark logo, and then on the back it's full color. But like I got these because like when I go out and I do my investigations, because honestly, like I stand behind this 110%. I think it's an amazing idea what you guys have put together, and it, like I said, it stacks everything against the perpetrators and puts it back into the hands of the victims. And I want to be able to show, because see, I know that the occult uses symbolism to be able to speak to each other, and so they pay attention to symbolism. So I think that when I will wear this kind of stuff when I'm out investigating and filming for my documentaries and things like that, that I'm going to be sending a message to the enemy saying that you have no idea what's about to befall you, and that there's a documentary being made about your organization. And me and you have been talking about the new documentary that I've been working on, and I can't wait to wear this stuff and put it out there. I have the hat.
Love it.
You sent me the hat quite a while ago, but it's got the metal shield on there, and I wear this every time I go out. Every time I go out to investigate, and then they were so kind to hook me up with this huge sticker, dude. This thing is big. That's a monster sticker, bro. Put that on the back of my vehicle. My wife says, "No, you're not." And I'm like, "Yes, I am." She's like, "No, you ain't." I mean, look how bright they glow, dude. So bright. I mean, he's just flashing it that quick, it absorbs.
Yeah, I don't know how well you can see it on this. I just got a little one, but yeah, that the glow is the strongest. It's the strongest glow ever. Well, it's already now, but oh my God, that's just blinding myself. Yeah, you can see, like, I mean, it absorbs it instantly, and it adjusts, the lighting adjusts. So, but yeah, it's the brightest glow, period, for sure. I mean, it's definitely the brightest glow out there. But yeah, so we're building that up, and again, with the website, there'll also be like a private forum. So like survivors and then advocates and people like that can discuss, because, obviously, yes, this is went more mainstream and stuff like that, but, it's still social media and stuff is a hostile environment. So we're, trying to create a safe place for people to discuss, nothing too sensitive, because obviously in a forum, there's, we do our best, but there's only so much you can protect in a forum. Like no matter what, people can still get in there, right, and see something. So obviously like a forum where stuff is being discussed is, obviously not like 100% bulletproof private, obviously, right? I mean, we got to be realistic about it. But the reporting forms are so. But anyways, so yeah, we're launching that, and there's going to be other things. We'll have resources on there, and there's going to be a lot of like healing, deprogramming, transitioning to a healthier lifestyle, things like that, for survivors, because it's hard. It's hard out there for survivors, and a lot of them, like, it's really, really hard to come out of this and to face life. I mean, and a lot of these people, like, we've got a lot of people that have submitted testimony, that have submitted evidence. I mean, we got people that are, high up in NASA. We've got people that are in the Defense Intelligence Agency, in Central Intelligence Agency, in the National Security Agency. We've got people that are in the military. We've got people that are in various, other intelligence factions. We've got people that are just, just salt of the earth farmers, like, I mean, we've got a wide variety of people submitting information, and we just have to we have to do our best to pursue justice for everybody. And the thing is that there's a lot of celebrities. There's, we have famous actors, we have famous entertainers, we have people with millions and millions of followers, some of the highest social media influencers. We have, some of them, we got all sorts of people, but like, so it's one thing for them to submit information. It's a complete other thing for them to go public and put themselves up there, because, like, is that going to be worth it? And the thing is, like, we don't want people to do that before it's time, and if it's not the best move for them. We totally support people if that's what they choose to do, of course. But hey, like, are you going to lose your livelihood? Are you going to lose your income and your ability to support your family? And like, well, is what you're coming forward with actually going to be effective to the point to where we're going to see change from it to where it was worthwhile? It's kind of like a risk benefit assessment, right? Like, and we just want people to make the smartest choice. So again, like, that's why, we do this. We collect ourselves in the background, see what's the smartest to come forward, what makes sense. And we just, basically, again, like, try to do this as safe as possible, as effective as possible. And we just try to make it make sense, right? And at the same time, we also support each other, because I'm telling you right now, it's not easy coming out of this. And a lot of people that are in this at a high level,
right,
everybody around them is in this. And when you step out of this and you are at a high level, when you step out of this, you leave everything behind. You might lose your income, you might lose your friends, you might lose your family, you might lose your livelihood. It is hard. And it's very hard. And if people don't have somewhere to go for some support and love, I mean, it's, what do you have? So, like, we're just trying to do the best we can out here to safely and effectively pursue justice and pursue the change that we need, and to do our best to support and help survivors,
right. And and I'm not saying there's a time limit on everything that's going on right now, but we know that there are things that the enemy has planned for the future, to be able to cause events, cataclysmic events, things like that, to be able to further the New World Order and further the satanic agenda, further bring
Oh,
people
yeah.
under mind control and things like that. I think that something I look at quite often is these attacks, lone gunmen, whatever, all over the place, these traumatic experiences that people are going through, hearing about in the news. And this, Kathy O'Brien goes through it all and talks about how this is public trauma-based mind control. It's not even maybe like a person that is, grown up in something like this. Like, they're even attacking the wide range of the public through the things in the news and the media, and also events in real life. You know what I mean? And so, like, with all that going on, you have, Russ Dizdar Black Awakening. You've got the sleeper cells that are all over the place, and obviously they've raised their children the way that they have programming them since childhood. Even these sleeper cell terrorists can be under CIA mind control, because they're a lot of those terrorist organizations are paid for by the CIA. You know what I mean? And they're funded by the CIA. And America has always funded both sides of the coin. So with that being said, what do you think is kind of going on in today's society, and where do you think it's going? And what are your thoughts on all that?
Oh man, 100%, like you said. And it's important to realize too, the CIA, behind the CIA, and as some may know, the predecessor to the CIA is OSS, Office of Strategic Services. And the predecessor to that, guess who started that? The Knights of Malta, the Sovereign Military Order of Malta. And this, again, it leads up the chain, because really it's, a lot of the intelligence agencies work together, right, and amongst themselves, and there's really a conglomerate. But really what the conglomerate is of the people, the bottlenecked areas of the controlling parties, they tend to be part of globalist secret societies, globalist orders, whatever terminology you want to use. These are the people running things. And yeah, you better believe that there are sleepers strategically placed, okay? And I mean, in the US alone, just speaking of this, you have sleeper agents, and you have mind-controlled people, Manchurian candidate level programming from MK Ultra related programs. You have people down to street gangs. And you'll see, again, when I talk about this, you see street gangs. Again, they use the same red and blue, 5-point star, 6-point star, hidden knowledge, pyramid hierarchy. It's the same thing. It might be slightly different. It might be just a portion of it, but they're using the same general recipe, the same general structure. Okay, it's a micro macro scale. It's fractals. It's the same thing over and over again. So you have from street gangs to narco cartels. You have people in entertainment. Again, go back to Mockingbird, right? You have people in politics. You have people in judicial, legislative, and executive that are uniting the separation of powers just for their own agenda, right? You have all these people, and they are controlled by globalist orders. You have these people that were the activation codes, the command, the control, the communication is left to these globalist orders. A lot of this is managed and ran through the clandestine services, but the people in the clandestine services that ultimately have the power, again, are also part of these globalist orders. A sovereign military of Malta. You have the very top of like the Opus Dei. You have a variety of these different, you have the dragon societies, you have a variety of these different groups, but that's what's really running this. So yeah, just like you said with Dizdar, with the Black Awakening, and everybody knows again about like what's going now is like you have President Trump, you have all this talk about the UFO, about the UAP, about alien, about NHI disclosure. This is all part of the plan that's long been in the works to essentially bring about this new golden age, bring about this new world order, this one world nation, and you even have opposing sides that are against each other supposedly, but their end games are the same. So it's like, make it make sense, because what they're doing is they have different people in different areas, whether it's the left, the right, whether it's red, whether it's blue, whether it's this, whether it's that, they're scooping up all the different demographics of people that don't go along with this, but they want to go along with that instead. So they're making sure they have their leaders, right, in all different genres and all different areas to get everybody and pull them in so they can rally their support and feed into what they're doing. And it's truly scary times, because we really are right there at it. And I mean, we're getting there. And a lot of people know, and especially I'm guessing your channel, I know that you have a background and you're very familiar with some long-standing plans to like bring about stuff. Now, those plans are still in effect. Yes, the plans are ever changing, because as the situation changes, they slightly change their plan to be most effective, right? And go with it. Right. But we're getting there. And yes, a lot of that is mass activation of people when the time is right. And it's That's really what it's about, though, is because when the time's right, because they're not going to pull the trigger unless if they're sure they can make it count. There's two instances where they're going to pull the trigger. One is where, hey, things are in line, we know we're ready to go, boom, pull the trigger. Two would be if they're absolutely cornered and they have nothing else to do but to pull the trigger because they're cornered and about to go, right? Then they pull the trigger and just cause mayhem, right? Just like because they're writhing, right?
So in the Albert Pike letters, they talk about formidable social cataclysm which in all its horror will show clearly to the nations the effects of absolute atheism, the origin of the most bloody turmoil. I think this, kind of counts for that, as we want this mass activation to create this violence. I mean, you could go into movies like, even just the whole idea of a zombie apocalypse, right? Maybe not flesh-eating zombies, but people that have been triggered or activated, or a frequency used on people to create agitation or violence or anger. You know what I mean? I think that they're going to do this on a mass scale. It's something I've always thought. I don't talk about it a lot publicly, about how, like, I really believe that only believers in Jesus Christ are not going to be susceptible to this kind of violent activation. It might be during the Great Tribulation, it might be before it, but I think that there is an event coming, like talking about, where, like Russ Dizdar, called it the Black Awakening, but I think that there's like precursors to it as well. They want civil unrest, they want societal collapse. This helps them bring about their new world order. Without that chaos, they don't have order.
No, 100%. It is, order from chaos, right? Order ab chaos, or whatever. Yes, and that's a large part of it. But again, they're not trying to pull their trigger and blow their load, so to speak, unless if they're reasonably assured that it's going to achieve the desired outcome. And part of that is that everybody, and you got to understand, like the bloodlines, because there's bloodlines. This is a tribal culture and tribal religion that goes back way back. We're talking about Babylonian blasphemy. We're talking about Egyptian mystery. We're talking about way back. This has been going on. And yes, a lot of this went more underground, and now it's surfacing again. But these people, they essentially, they have programmed and brainwashed people on an industrial scale. After MK Ultra, after World War II, when we had Nazi scientists come into US, they went into Japan, they went into Russia, they went all over, right? And essentially, and some of this like brainwashing in MK Ultra was industrialized, but this brainwashing in MK Ultra, you got to understand that this also is intertwined with elements of the occult, right? You have the occult hierarchy that's mixed in with it, and some of these age-old just occult path-working recipes, because like this is what a lot of this brainwashing is derived from these age-old methods, right? It's just all about, what is someone other than what they were taught when they were raised. And some of these initiations, some of these trials, some of these hero journeys, so on and so forth, are just really like super hard lessons that stick with people from life. So anyways, when you have some of these people that were brainwashed in this to be a sleeper, right? Say, hey, you're a sleeper, say Russ Dizdar Black Awakening, right? So we're going to have, in just using that themed nomenclature, we have people that are satanic super soldiers that can be activated, right? So in order for them to be activated and go through with it, their outside external stimuli, the situation in the world, somewhat needs to match what they were told and what they were taught when they were brainwashed. Because if they go to get activated and the outside world isn't matching their instructions and their lessons and what was going on when they were brainwashed, they might not go through with it. So if there's not complete chaos, if there's not like this strong opposition that they see, they might break free from it. So the point is they need to pull the trigger when it's conducive to their plans actually coming to fruition. So the point I'm saying is, say, boom, right now we hit it. Say, okay, Black Awakening, boom, activate all the sleepers. We're going to have the people, you have a group of sleepers. Some are going to be politicians and in media and in influence, and they're going to hand down a specific story, and then you're going to have some people on the ground that are in critical infrastructure. They're going to sabotage it and, you know, blow some of the electrical, you know, infrastructure. You know, they're going to boom, take down communications, you know, so on and so forth. You know, say that's one aspect. And so on and so forth. So, you know, say you want that to happen. Well, boom, we do that right now. People are going to be like, well, hold on. Like, I mean, you know, this doesn't sound right. Why are they going to go through with it? Right. So the thing is, like, there needs to be enough going on to make that conducive. Right. Well, you know, as far as I know, because a lot of things get changed, but obviously I'm privy to a lot of plans. One, from when I was involved with this. Two, from, you know, hearing from a lot of people that are even still in the system. But as far as I know, they are wanting to fire this off when the time was right. And you got to understand, they don't want to just annihilate everybody, because then they'll have no pawns. They'll have no people to preside over, no people to rule over, right? So, like, how can they actually get this going? Well, obviously they are ramping up some stuff. You know, there's been a few different scenarios that are played around with. You know, one of the major things that's supposed to feed into this is supposedly a fault line going. And I'm just talking here because there can be, you know, this is an unlimited world, but one of it is like the San Andreas and the New Madrid fault line. These are some things that are possible. And even if you look into like the United States critical infrastructure defense, critical infrastructure defense, whatever the proper name for it is, you know, these fault lines are something that's on there. It's basically the fault lines and a cyber attack. Those are like the two main things. So you got to understand, like, say one of the fault lines goes, and there's already a natural disaster, you know, that might also kind of kick off some rioting and some looting. Well, then they might be able to launch off basically martial law to clean it up, you know, COG, contingency of government. And so this is what people need to understand, is not just in the USA, but worldwide, but specifically talking in the US, since that's where we are at. All of this Black awakening, all this mass activations, and all of this essentially one world government and stuff, this is all linked up to COG, contingency of government, continuity of government. Again, this goes back to the Iran-Contra stuff. Yes, I know people are like, okay, well, what was that? There was Oliver North and importing coke and stuff like this. Well, if people remember, actually, in the hearings, they started asking them about continuity of government, because what happened was they had started FEMA, which was originally Federal Emergency Military Action, not Federal Emergency Management Agency. It was originally Federal Emergency Military Action. And they had spent 12 times the budget of natural disaster relief on covert operations. Okay, 12 times the money that went into natural disaster relief, which is what we know FEMA as now. But they had actually put that towards covert operations, and they were running drills like the infamous Rex 84B, Rex 84 Bravo. And what was that? That was essentially rounding up dissidents and rounding up citizens and putting them in essentially camps, right? Prison camps. Okay.
We've gone over that document on this channel.
Okay, and I figured you might have, yeah. And then obviously they have lists of this. You know, you have these, you know, deep underground military bases, and you have these bunkers. You know, you have your you know, what is it, like Raven Rock? You have your Mount Weather. You know, you have all these main installations that are, you know, basically for continuity of government and stuff like that. And guess what? The people that are to take charge in continuity of government and stuff like this is all like private practice people, basically, who are like non-elected people get presented up front and stuff like this. You know, so that's like their main play.
Believe it or not, my moderator Laura, you know, her husband Kevin was talking to me about, you know, a document that has to deal with the medical field, and I forget what it's called. Laura's going to have to spell me in the live chat, but it's got even how they can make, you know, beheadings legal during emergencies, and that like judges have already, you know, I forget what it is, but it's like, you know, there's no more the way things are. It's like, you know, even like you said, unelected elected officials now have the power in this declaration of an emergency. You know, it puts it in the hands of like these, you know, clandestine individuals. And I forget what the document was called. I really hope she puts it in the live chat. But
going back to the Wild West.
Right, there's a document, and it's like the codes for like when you go into a medical facility and you say, "I got a headache," you know what I mean? There's a code for that. Oh, the CDC. Or anyways, you know, so it's I think it's by the CDC is what Laura's saying. But anyways, so it's a real thing. And it's funny because you mentioned how, you know, people who aren't even elected officials get into power. You know, it just goes to prove that, you know, this stuff is all legal, and you know, as soon as they enact it, boom, it's ready to go.
Yeah. So I mean, so it's all tied in with that, you know, and we have things converging right now. You know, like I said, one of the things was, okay, if the fault lines go and there's some earthquakes and there's some natural disasters, then obviously already there's going to be some rioting. There's already going to be some issues, and they might be able to pass off that a little bit easier to where people are like, hey, it's not like, oh, we have some tyrannical government. Hey, like we have some natural disasters, people aren't eating, but then there's some people on the ground going crazy, killing each other and looting. Like, we need to support this to go with this. And yes, the world's changed. We've had a major earthquake like we've never had, disaster like we've never had in our lifetimes, and we need to support this, right? So like that might be something to where then people get activated and like, hey, it's absolute mayhem, and like there's a reason for them to go through with it, right? Stuff like that. Obviously, you know, recently there's been a semi-dissolution of borders. We've had a lot of people come in from the south. You know, part of the whole plan was to dissolve the north and the south borders in America, you know, going up to Canada, going down to Mexico and South America. You know, that's always been part of the plan. How are they going to achieve that? Well, they've already let in a bunch of people, right? So like at that point, like, you know, that can only feed into it. You already have a large part of the American populace that probably would readily go into saying like, hey, we've got a lot of people from the south that came in, we need to eradicate these people. Like that can only add into it. These are things that can just feed into, hey, we have these mass activations and we're thinking things went too far. We have terrorists in here, we have this looting, we have this, we have ultra destruction, we need to activate martial law and clean this up and protect our good citizens, right? Like, it's just, you got to understand, it's just, they're looking for a way to where they can activate their plan and get to the end goal. But they have to have people that are going to go with it, because like if they just try to activate it when nothing's going on, like, you know, there's going to be some people that are part of the National Guard, that are part of this, that are part of that. You know, they don't want to like round up their own family and their own cousins or their own, you know, so it's like people got to understand, like there has to be a conducive situation to where the external present situation is similar enough to be conducive to their programming and their training and what they were told and what they experienced when they were brainwashed at that point. So, you know, that's largely what we're headed for. And now we have, again, we have, you know, this UAP, UFO, NHI, alien stuff. Now, getting to this, if people will remember, way back, there was an operation called Operation Northwoods, and that was JFK actually turned that down before he was assassinated. But Northwoods was essentially going to commit a terrorist attack, blame it on Cuba, and get us to attack Cuba, right? Okay, well, the thing is, you know, as far as I know, and many people know, and this has been talked about, this is like an open secret at this point, they had been planning to do a similar situation, but it's basically like a false flag alien event. But here's the thing is, they're already laying the groundwork for this. You know, they've got it to where they're supposedly about to release some major files. There's been a lot of talk, especially if you go in the UAP community, the disclosure community. You'll see there's a lot of talk. There's a lot of talk. But unlike Northwoods, guess what? Cuba isn't the aliens. Cuba can stand up and say, hey, actually, no, we didn't do this. This isn't us. Like, has nothing to do with us. This is faked. Well, guess what? The aliens can't do that, especially if they're non-existent at that point. They're not going to say, hey, it wasn't us. It's your government trying to trick you to do this. No. You see what I'm saying? So like, it's even sweeter than Operation Northwoods, because if they pull this out and say, hey, this was an alien attack, like, who's going to stand up and say, no, it wasn't? Like, some random Joe Blow. You see what I'm saying? So like, it's
Right.
even easier for them to pass that off. So like, yes, of course, they have technology to pull that off at this point. We look at like our foremost aircraft, nothing public has been advanced in a long time. There's a very little talk of like F-47s and like SR-72s and stuff like this, but like the advancements that we've made have been kept completely secret, and just people don't know what it is for decades and decades and decades.
Technology-wise.
Completely, it's hard to even put a number on it. It's just expounded and expounded and expounded. And people say, oh, we would know about it. Well, let's be realistic for a second. What do you know about any clandestine operation or any top secret government operation that hasn't been talked about on the news? And don't act like the news isn't controlled. It clearly is. So like, really, what do we know? We know what we've been told. Yes, there's been some people that come up with some stuff and talk about it. But like a tight lid is kept on this stuff. So anyways, the stage is set. Whether it's false flag alien stuff to come up, right? Which then, I mean, of course they could say some false flag aliens, some crafts appear, some people die, whatever the situation is, boom, martial law, continuity of government. Hey, we've got a serious existential threat. We have got to, boom, form a one world government, and plan to defend ourselves, something like that. And if people are going against that, like, hey, there's too much, you can't question that, right? Like, people's lives are at stake. So like, I mean, if you think that's like, I don't know anybody that actually, I haven't experienced anybody says that, oh, that's not possible or likely, because like, I mean, clearly, unfortunately, that could get pulled pretty quick. It wouldn't be that hard in my mind for what they got set. All they need to do is do it. I mean, who's going to say no? You see what I'm saying? Like, I mean, obviously I would say no and stuff like that, but all I'm saying is like the stage is set. So between fault lines going, between the borders from the south and a lot of people coming in, like, I mean, there's a few different avenues for this to take place. But I do believe that they're just trying to slowly push towards this, to where they can constantly analyze public sentiment and are constantly doing predictive analysis and operational simulations to see what can we get away with. Hey, what's the public sentiment on this? And they're basically seeing, because they're just waiting and pushing and getting people fighting amongst themselves, pushing this issue, pushing that issue, and then basically reading how they go. And whenever the tensions get high enough, boom, they pull the trigger on it. But they don't want to do it preemptively, because if they pull the trigger and then they don't get everybody to go along with it, meaning people that aren't directly brainwashed, but people that are just idle, if they don't, if people won't accept it, and then if their actual brainwashed people won't go through with it, right? Well, then, they've blown their load, and what are they going to do? Like, their plans are ruined, right? So like, they're just slowly trying to get it to that point to where, boom, they can pull the trigger, and then, we'll have people support it, because that's what they want. Again, they don't want to fight everybody. They don't want to force everybody. Of course, that's not what they want. Just like when they brainwash the people, they don't want to be forcing their brainwashed people to have to do what they want. They want willing members. They want loyal members of their cult. They want people to do what they're supposed to be a part of it and believe in it. That's what they want. Because if they have to fight and force everybody, like, they've already lost. That's not what they want. So again, they're just slowly raising the tension and setting the stage to where then finally they can pull the trigger on that. And then, again, between the fault lines, between the borders going, between these, kind of like, between like Iran, between like China, Taiwan, between Russia, Ukraine, all this, they keep on raising the temperature. Like, it's getting to a boiling point to where they might be able to pull this trigger. The stage is getting set. You see, along the way, that like prophecies are along their way to being fulfilled. Like, we're right here to where stuff can happen at any time. So, we just need to be prepared for it. I mean, we are in these times to where, unfortunately, like, I do believe this trigger is going to be pulled at any point, and it's absolutely terrifying. And if you had seen, like, like I say, I go back to Rex 84 Bravo, I go back to like some of this, like, whenever I was involved with these black sites, yeah, they were doing modern Rex 84 Bravo types of drills, and they were getting ready, and there was brainwashed people that are in our tier 1 units. There's brainwashed people across all walks of life, high up in our social influencing media with millions and millions of followers, our, foremost journalists, what I'm saying? Guess what? The politicians, again, people in our special operations command, people all over, they have been brainwashing people and setting this up. And they have also been setting the stage through public relations, advertising, everything. Like, they've been, the stage is set again. So, like, we're right here, and we just need to be ready for it and do the best we can. All we can do is be prepared, and all we can do is do our best to, educate our neighbor in order to prepare for this, because it's truly scary times. But I do believe that this can be stopped. I don't think that this is inevitable. I don't think that, hey, everything has to happen. I think things can be mitigated, and it can be a lot smoother than people think. I do see light at the end of the tunnel. I do see hope. I truly do. So again, that's just why we're doing what we're doing. Plans have continuously changed, on the end, to where, they're having to set back, they're having to change things. And that's because, people aren't inherently evil. So hopefully we can just all come together and do our best to stop this. Are some things going to play out? I mean, sure, maybe that's inevitable, but again, all we can do is just do the best we can, play the smartest we can. And what am I doing other than trying to educate people and do my part? We're putting it together to get the information and present it as credibly, effectively as possible, while keeping the witnesses, the subjects, the victims, the survivors as safe as possible while we do so.
Well, that was a nice way to wrap a little bow on it. And I'm sorry to the audience for the echo. There's nothing that I can do about it, but because there's a few people in live chat talking about the echo. But
is there echo?
Yeah, it's all right. But I figured that give you a moment to give your final thoughts. And, anything you want to say before we hop off here.
Man, that's it. Yeah, I'm sorry y'all about the echo. There's been a lot of problems with the equipment over here. I'm going to be honest. Yeah. And this is the ninth. This is the ninth since I've went back doing interviews and speaking out. This is the ninth one. This is only the second time I've successfully been able to do anything, and this is just straight through the cell phone. I have a whole studio here. Every single time the internet has went down, like literally 1 minute into logging on to stuff. So my Wi-Fi internet is completely went. Coming to the fifth time when I was doing these interviews, because the first four, it would cut out right away. I got a hotspot. Well, guess what? The hotspot wouldn't even work. And I had tested it prior and set it up, but the hotspot wouldn't work. That would get disconnected. So, it was just ridiculous. So luckily, at least the cellular service has been enough to where I can log on and talk with y'all, and it is at least coming through. That seems to be the only thing I can do here. So, which is just ridiculous. But no, I appreciate you having on me, and I'm glad that this came through enough. Y'all just, we'll all do the best we can. If you know any survivors, witnesses, if y'all have any information, please go to organizedsafety.org and submit it. You'll see it walks you through very clearly, and you can opt in whether you want notification for cooperation, whether you want notification, or whether you are willing to answer questions. Go for it. If you have any talents or want to help organize safety, you can click that. Otherwise, if you have any information on persons of interest, locations of interest, or just general reports of interest, you know, come on, submit it, because we're constantly mapping this out. We're putting this information together. We're strategically notifying places, and we're building up cases behind the scenes to press forward and pursue justice. Because I mean, it is a race. It's a race. These, you know, these culprits, these bloodthirsty, money-hungry power and warmongers are doing the best they can to set the stage, to pull the trigger, and try to, you know, set us up for a totalitarian one-world government. And, you know, we're doing everything we can to fight that, because we're not going to let these corrupt, pervert, Satanists and Luciferians, you know, run this world anymore. You know, we're taking the power back. We're breaking the cycle, and we're going for the head.
Amen to that, man. And I'm going to put your email on here real quick. So that way, if people want to contact you, they can. Hold on.
Absolutely. I appreciate you, man.
Hold on one second here. So, gray area operator is at gmail.com. Is the,
or just gray at organizesafety.org.
All right. So that's
either one. Yeah, either one. I got email addresses. Yeah, any one of them.
I'm gonna do this for org. Whoops. And then just put that up here, and then that way I can just throw it up here as well. So it's gray at organizedsafety.org as well. So that way, if people want to contact you, you can, you know, and you can. I know he doesn't have the merch available on the site yet, but if people are interested in buying merch, you can email him and get in touch with him and give them your info that way and figure something out, you know, behind the scenes. But, you know, and
yeah,
again,
we're getting it together. Because I wasn't able to handle it here, but I got a guy that's pressing it, and we're getting some shirts in and all that. So I'm hoping we'll be able to launch it next weekend. I still have some stuff, but just before we like actually launch that, we wanted to be ready to press it and get it out and not like have anything delayed. So just trying to be responsible with it.
Yeah, and like I said, the t-shirts on the back, they're full of color. And then on the front, you have the glow-in-the-dark patch, you know, and it charges right up, glows really bright, really fast. So just wanted to throw that out there. He's got hats, he's got shirts, he's got stickers. So, and I mean, he's got massive stickers. So, and then that way, if people want to support them, they can support organized safety. I know I plan on doing it and continuing. So, but I appreciate you, man. Thank you for giving us your time today.
I appreciate you greatly, and I appreciate everybody taking the time to watch. And thank you. You know, y'all keep doing what you're doing, and you too, man. You're doing a lot of good out here. And I know what you're working on now is real good too. So, you know, it's shining some light on some things, you know, and connecting some dots, some serious dots, and people need to see, you know, how this spider web network works, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. If you would hang around the backstage for just a moment, that way I would say a proper goodbye. But God bless you all, and may He keep you all. Thank you for coming today, and go out there and change this world in which you live.